Severance tax for it.
Companies aren't sort of currently charged for the natural resources that flow out of the ground. I mean, that would be highly controversial as well. But it's probably not as controversial as everything else we're talking about.
Yeah, right. Is there anything that everybody loves? It's coming out of their pockets.
Morning.
Morning, Dwight. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. Good to see you.
They've got a really nice notepad from Filipino. Concerned about the body,
Yes.
about staff response.
Oh,
It's like a really nice.
Good, good. I talked with you yesterday afternoon.
Please. No, I'm good. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. I'll put it in my office. Yeah.
Who is that?
Okay, good morning.
Good morning, Supervisor. We can hear you in Diamond Bar.
Ready to proceed. Looks like I've got a very small picture of all of you, but I think I see a quorum. If that's correct, Madam Secretary, could you call the roll?
Well, I'm sorry, Supervisor. We have Councilmember Robinson and Councilmember Mitchell here with us, and Mayor McCallum.
He's coming.
He's standing right behind.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I am in Santa Ana, and it's a little unusual circumstance and equipment for me, but I'm ready to start the Technology Committee for October 21st if everybody else is there, and I will start with a roll call, please.
Just call the roll. Just call the roll.
Councilmember Buscaino
Absent.
is absent. Supervisor McCallum,
Here.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Here.
Councilmember Robinson.
Here.
Supervisor Rutherford is absent. And Supervisor Benoit.
I'm here. Thank you very much. And we're ready to move into item number 1. And Mr. George is going to present on the additional funds for replacement of onboard CNG fuel tanks on school buses.
Good afternoon, board members, and thank you for all the support you have given us for the school bus program. Almost all the 50 school districts are participating quite enthusiastically. This item is requesting additional funds for onboard CNG fuel tank replacement. In April 2012, the board had set aside $3 million to assist school districts to replace expired CNG fuel tanks on the CNG buses they had purchased some time ago. If a bus is 14 years old, a CNG bus is 14 years old to 16 years old, several of their tanks would have expired. There's a expiration dates actually stamped on each tank. And per ARB guidelines and by state law, we are allowed to help these public school districts replace those expired tanks. And we had some good participation. Up till now, about 150 buses we have assisted in helping replace their tanks. But the original funds are nearly exhausted, and we have a backlog of several applications we are processing. So we are here to request the board to approve funding of an additional $2 million into the Carl Moyer Fund to continue this program. What we are doing is it's on a first come, first served basis for CNG buses that are at least 14 years old. That's by ARB's specification. It has to be 14 years old and can't be older than 16 years old. And we are only funding CNG buses owned by public school districts. There's another item. In April 2015, the board recognized $753,000 in DERA funds and placed these funds in Fund 17 and some in Fund 80. Then in 2016, July, the board amended an award to Cal Portland using DERA funds, including $275K in DERA funds from AP 1893 fund. these funds need to be transferred from Fund 80 to Fund 17. It's a protocol we are following for the execution of the Portland 7. This is kind of an exception from the main request. So we have added this request to the CNG tank funding. So in summary, we are requesting $2 million to be put into Kalmoya fund for CNG school bus fuel tank replacement, and in addition, transfer $275,000 from Fund 80 to Fund 70. And that's it. Thank you. We request.
Okay, colleagues, questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I might,
Yeah, please.
just so I understand the mechanism, how does a CNG tank age that it needs to be replaced?
Well, when we started the program, the CNG school bus program in 2001 in a big way, we weren't sure how long the tanks will last because it's under pressure. It's under high pressure, 3,500. So initially, all the manufacturers gave them 15 years
It's a
lifespan.
safety issue, Mayor, so there's,
Is it a welding or is it?
it's carbon fiber, and so
Oh,
just
it's
the
carbon.
fact that it's constantly filling at high pressure and, and using the fuel, there's just a concern about whether these would rupture after a certain.
Fatigue,
yes,
cracking or something
cycling
like that?
fatigue, exactly.
Right.
Okay.
Today's new tanks are actually last more than 25 years.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a few questions myself.
Other questions?
I have a few. So since 2001, it looks like 1,600 buses had had their fuel tanks replaced from, or well, maybe the buses were replaced, but they went from diesel to CNG, right?
Right.
And then we've basically taken about 3,000 and retrofitted with particulate traps.
Right.
And then I saw that we had the $3 million replacement back in 2012. So for the $3 million for replacement of similar to what we're doing here, right? And so we're asking for another $2 million more. Do we have an inventory of how many buses are potentially out there, and what's that number?
Yes, so Board Member Robinson, we do have an inventory. When we started in 2001, we did an inventory, and then since then, every few years, when we replace some buses, we update our inventory. Actually, right now, we are helping Air Resources Board with our own inventory because the board in ARB is actually looking also for older school buses, how to replace to come with a plan statewide.
Okay.
When this program started, we were replacing pre-87 buses.
Got it.
And then it got updated. Now we are replacing pre-1994 buses. Based on the inventory that is there, we believe we have still about 150 to 180 pre-87 buses. So that's our priority to replace them. And then we have a few hundred of pre-1994 buses still in operation. So usually on annual basis, we go out with our school bus program, funding opportunity, and every time we replace based on how much money we have, but usually we put around, say, anywhere between $15 to $20 million a year for school bus replacement.
Okay, so just if I heard correctly, so it was 150 to 180 pre-1987,
Yes,
and then a few hundred pre-1994.
yes.
Do we know a little bit more approximate how many that few hundred is? Are we talking 500, 600?
Yeah.
600?
Yes.
Okay, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
So,
Councilman, the total number of school buses operating in the basin is about 9,000
Yeah.
to 10,000 buses.
okay.
To give you
All
an
right.
idea of the level.
If I can,
But that includes private contractors also, and we do not, with private contractors, the only funding we have available for them is to retrofit 94 and newer school buses, not replacements.
Okay. And that's something different than is here. This is just the public
Sure,
owned buses, not the private.
yes.
I just wanted the proportion of ownership is about 55% private and 45% public school districts. And there are several public school districts that exclusively contract with private. LAUSD is one of those exceptions. They have their own and as well as contract with private.
Are the private more likely to have newer equipment or less likely?
Yes, because since school districts have replaced their own fleet throughout these years, we have since this program has started, we have allocated about $280 million
Yeah.
for school bus replacement. So those who contract with private contractors, they do require low emitting, newer buses. So contractors have been forced basically to update their inventory.
They're putting it in their RFPs when they're going out for
Yes.
bid. Okay. And, okay. And the last question about this second portion, it seems like pretty routine, just transferring the funds from Fund 80 to Fund 17. I've noticed we've had to do that a few times this year. It's just a process thing that we have to keep it in Fund 80 and move it to Fund 17, or is there something that we can do
No, we
kind of
just
one
made a
fell
mis-
swoop to make it
We
happen?
made a
or-
mistake when we came to
Okay.
the board revision without doing the financial portion of the fund transfer.
Okay, all right,
So we're not trying to fix that.
okay, good enough. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, good questions. Any other further questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
We have a motion and a second, please call the roll.
Mayor McCallum,
Yes,
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson,
Yes.
Supervisor Benoit,
Aye.
motion passes.
And as a
4-0.
reminder, if there's any indication of anybody wants to speak on these items, please let me know. But seeing none, we'll move to item number 2. And that's Mr. Cho is going to present on eco-friendly intelligent transportation systems.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor. Okay, this item is for projects proposed by National Center for Sustainable Transportation to improve efficiency for cargo transport operation both at the ports, also along the goods movement corridors in our basin. First, just background on the National Center for Sustainable Transportation, who is a proponent of these projects. The NCST is a consortium established by UC Davis in 2013 with a grant from U.S. Department of Transportation. Other members of the consortium include UC Riverside and USC, as well as Cal State Long Beach University from California. And also is represented by University of Vermont and the Georgia Tech from the East Coast. The center's main mission is to advance environmentally sustainable transportation systems. And the center pursues this mission through several approaches and strategies. One of them is to support research of cutting-edge technologies, just like zero-emission vehicles, as well as intelligent transportation systems, which is something that I'll be going over today. It also strongly believes in education, since all the members are actually university institutions, which makes sense, but it's important to educate not only the technology, the professionals and the experts, but also educate the policymakers on the needs and the ways to achieve sustainable transportation solutions for our programs. Also, the members of the consortium is actively engaged with the decision makers in all levels of government to ensure that their researches address the today's relevant and pressing issues, as well as to ensure that the findings from the research are shared and also incorporated in the policymaking process. We have received, in 2016, we have received many good proposals from NCST, close to almost 10, but based on the relevance to our priorities to reduce NOx and PM emissions from heavy-duty cruise movement operations, the following 3 proposals were selected for award recommendation. I'll go over them in more detail in later slides, but just to read them off. First one is the eco-friendly intelligent transportation system strategies. Second is to optimize freight loading balancing strategies for cargo freights. And finally, the third one is to conduct a market analysis for zero-emission heavy-duty trucks in dredge service operations. For proposal 1, which is to develop eco-ITS strategies, as a background, both UCR and USC are jointly working on a program called Eco Freighters Program at the ports to improve freight efficiency at the San Pedro Bay Port. This program involves a large-scale demonstration with over 100 dredge trucks from multiple trucking companies to demonstrate an intelligent freight movement or management system that combines several already developed ITS strategy and features. So just briefly describe how the system works is if you look at the slide, on the right side there is a Freightis Advanced Optimization Module, which is based on incorporating all the information provided from both marine terminal operators and the trucking fleets on the turn time, wait time, as well as cargo information and available trucks and their ETA to pick up the cargoes. We'll figure out the best match fit between the available trucks and the cargoes to be picked up. And this recommendation is communicated to the dispatchers at the trucking companies, who in turn schedule the container pickups based on these recommendations and sends the information via user interface to truck drivers with the information, the cargo containers, and the time window for pickups. What's also available in this feature, which is quite beneficial, is what they call EcoDrive module, which provides real-time advice based on the information from the traffic signal information database to tell drivers basically how fast or slow they can drive through the intersection based on the signal timing and the phases. This helps to minimize the number of stop-and-go operations, will also help to improve fuel efficiency as well as environmental benefits in the surrounding communities.
If I might, question?
Yes.
Does it also include traffic, looking at traffic congestion and how to route the truck to the appropriate place?
Yes, yeah, I was going to get to that, but yeah, the program also provides best routes to travel for the drivers based on the traffic conditions around the port. So, so the drivers will basically be able to take the best optimal route to get to the destinations. And so that's basically the gist of the Eco-Freightis program that these two institutions are already working on. Now, complementing this program, UCR, in partnership with USC, is proposing to develop and demonstrate additional ITS strategies to further improve the efficiency and environmental benefits, such as the first UC Riverside is proposing to integrate a truck eco-routing algorithms they have developed from a separate study into this program. And this algorithm basically figures out the best routes for trucks to take to minimize NOx emissions based on the emission and energy profile that are specific to that truck model. It also, the project also expands the data acquisition by installing data loggers to collect operational data from engines and after treatment to more accurately quantify the improvements in the energy use and the emissions generated from the integration of these ITS strategies. In addition, the USC, who is a partner in this project as well, will be integrating ramp metering and merge and lane control and other control strategies in a simulation study to investigate how these strategies will help to improve the traffic flow, especially in a high volume traffic conditions. And the simulation study will also investigate how best to incorporate both electric and hybrid electric truck technologies in the routing system as well. So deliverables from this project will include technical memos on the test demonstration result, as well as the recommendations on how best to deploy these ITS strategies. Second proposal is to develop optimized load balancing strategies for the cargo freights. Today's freight system has many inefficiencies built in because of lack of communication and coordination between the parties across the goods movement network. So some of these inefficiencies will be addressed by the Eco-Freightis program they're developing, but the program is still limited and lacks the capability to predict overcrowding of the recommended route when all the freight is directed the same route. So to address this inefficiency and limitation, US is proposing to develop an innovative approach to utilize a central coordinator who has access to all the information from all the parties involved, marine terminal operators, LMCs, as well as the rail yard operators, to assign the cargo freights to the most efficient routes, time periods, and transport modes. The coordinator will have also access to the high-fidelity simulation models of the road and rail yard networks to make more reliable decisions, and the USC will test out this approach in a test bed, simulating the realistic scenarios to evaluate the efficiency of the program. Finally, USC will also investigate the impact of the new technologies, truck technologies such as the electric and hybrid trucks, and on the load balancing system, and to identify the ways to integrate these trucks with conventional diesel trucks to achieve the optimal balance in both efficiency as well as in environmental benefits. The third and final proposal is to conduct market analysis for zero-emission drayage trucks, such as the ones you see in the photos on the right side. These trucks, especially the battery electric trucks, which are the top two that you see in the slide, are not yet capable of supporting the full range of drayage operations because of the limited range as well as the long recharging or refueling times. However, we are learning from our projects that there are sub-markets or niche markets within the drayage industry that can be supported or well suited for these type of technologies, such as near dock operations within 5 to 6 mile radius from the port terminals that basically requires frequent wait time in the queue. And so you don't really need a long range to support these operations. So in this proposed project, USC will study the market potential for these electric and hybrid electric trucks from both economic and environmental perspectives, including cost-benefit analysis. Also, USC will take into considerations the rate of progress on some of these technologies, including the batteries, to identify the best potential markets in the 5 to 10 years out window time frame. In the part 2 of the research project, USC will also examine the both financial and regulatory incentives to promote these truck technologies in the cargo transport operations. Since this proposed study will use the demonstration vehicles that are funded through our district-funded projects, one of the benefits will be that this study will provide directly relevant advices on the analysis as well as strategies to promote the trucks that we are funding. And finally, another benefit that I like to mention is this study will offer an independent market analysis from a highly respected institution like USC. That will help us to formulate effective policies and strategies for these type of vehicles. This table summarizes the project costs involved for these 3 proposed projects, and the total combined project cost, as you can see, is roughly $3.7 million. And the NCST is requesting about $1.1 million for funding from the district, with cost share of amount of $2.6 million, which is about 70% of the total project cost. So in closing, staff recommends to execute the following contracts that are listed from the Clean Fuels Fund. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, members?
I'd like to hear from Dwight.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I think that, what we're doing here is great. I kind of liken it to being something like Waze for the commercial industry, like the Waze app for the commercial industry, looking at both economic and ecological impacts from a positive perspective. So overall, very supportive. I kind of have 2 recurring themes that I keep pushing on. One is with the zero-emission battery electric trucks, that we just continue to make sure that we're focusing on the weight of the product that's being moved. So I feel like it's a standard standard comment that I make, but I just want to make sure that that's completely included there. Another is in the load balancing side. just more communication between the different parties on how they might be able to work together on different things. I refer to it as street turns of containers, ocean containers, but it really what it is just a focus on trying to make sure that we're not moving air around the region. So the line I keep using is, we're polluting the air while moving air. And it's really frustrating from my perspective to see that happen. In my own business this year, I've about 20% now of my business has come that way. I've been able to basically eliminate 20% of my truck trips by working with people as closely as my direct neighbor. I think some of the staff here are familiar with the company Cal Cartage. They're literally right next door to me. And into one of my businesses. And this year, they had 500 empty containers that they were going to return to the port that I needed to pick up for export. So we've eliminated 1,000 trips between our two companies by just driving 500 feet down the street and then trading that. And so, I think that part of the load balancing, I'd love to see them, continue to try to look at that. There's a number of software companies that are trying to come up with concepts. I know Freightus has talked about it as well.
Right.
So, but I'd just like to see an emphasis on that. And I'll just save it for now. That's another comment that I have for item 6. So it's ditto on item 6.
So my concern, that's.
Yeah, but let me just say that I'm sorry, Council Mitchell, did you have something to add
Sorry,
first?
yeah, I just wanted to make a comment in response to what Dwight has just said. Because I wanted to hear what Dwight said, because I'm wondering if these things really work. I think inefficiency in the ports is one of our biggest problems. We can do a lot for air quality by making the system more efficient. But it's the old adage, you can lead the horse to water, but you cannot make him drink it. So I'm looking at like the load balancing thing. Will the horse drink it? Will the people that are in the system actually use these strategies? In your opinion, Dwight?
Well, they have to see the success. So if you've got a coordinator that's helping you and, the day before it took you an hour to get from one location to the next, and now you've got a coordinator to help you and you're getting there in 45 minutes, you see the benefit and you'll use it. But if it becomes more cumbersome and doesn't really save you much time, then your likelihood of continuing to work with it's pretty low.
Time savings,
Yep.
less fuel
Now,
costs.
they're doing their cost benefit analysis, just like we are, so.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Okay. One further thought. I really very much appreciate Councilman Robinson's comments to the point where I think we ought to include a requirement that the USC folks doing this study meet with you and talk about your experience as a businessman as part of the research in this project. And you can convey the concerns of the committee at the same time, but your experience is just invaluable.
I'd be happy to do so.
And we'll do that, Supervisor.
Okay, I'll move approval.
Okay, so make sure that that's part of the approval and recommendation. And with that, I'll move approval of the item.
I'll second it.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mayor McCallum,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson,
Yes.
Supervisor Benoit,
Yes.
motion passes 4 ayes.
Thank you very much. That'll take us to item, the next item, and item 3, and that is electrification study and options. And let's see, that's going to be Ms. Kuo?
Patricia Kwan, yes.
Kwan? I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. So this is to execute a contract to conduct a study of electrification options and for energy services in EJ and non-attainment areas. So there has been research to suggest that electrification of energy services can really achieve greenhouse gas and criteria pollutant reductions in California, but there haven't really been any studies on costs and benefits of electrification. So CEC put out a recent funding solicitation seeking applied research projects in these areas, and EPRI was one of those awardees. So this proposal, this project would focus on areas of greatest impact, the EJ and non-attainment areas, as I mentioned previously, and would include some initial scoping, technology assessment, working groups on technical, environmental, and policy aspects. EPRI would do an analysis on air quality and greenhouse gas impacts and would create electrification plans by technology. And the policy and working group would make recommendations. So the funding for this project, over half of it comes from the CEC. Some of this also comes from EPRI, and then 10% would come from our agency. This is staff's proposal for a total of about 1.6 million. So staff would recommend executing an agreement with EPRI to cost share this study on real-world electrification options to not exceed 150,000 from the Clean Fuels Fund. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
First, if I could ask to describe what EPRI, who that is. It's not covered in the slides, and I've forgotten if I knew.
So EPRI is the Electric Power Research Institute. They are the research arm of a consortium of utilities. So the IOUs all fund research through EPRI.
Where are they located?
So they're
Where are they located?
a research consortium for the utilities, electric utilities.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, so EPRI is a research consortium for the electric utilities.
Okay, so are they located in a particular place where they're headquartered?
They're in Palo Alto, California.
Okay, thank you. All right, colleagues, other questions?
I have a question. Mr.
Ms.
Chair?
Go ahead, Ms. Mitchell.
I noticed that the proposal is to focus on EJ communities and also on the ports so I'm wondering, we have pretty impacted communities in West Long Beach, all along that corridor, that 710 corridor. What kind of communities are we going to be looking at in this research?
So we would be looking at non-attainment areas, so I didn't mean to imply that it's only going to be areas around the port, so it could include other areas such as you described.
So they're going to work with NRDC to identify the communities, and their intent is to get down to the zip code level and even lower, and then look at the grid impacts for if they did install certain types of electrification. So they're looking at distributed resources. In the ports, it'd be electric forklifts. I mean, so lots of practical implementation of electrification, and then look at what's the impact on the grid and if there's a cost effectiveness analysis they can do to see whether it makes sense from an economic point of view for those communities. So no one's done that before. And then they're going to model it with air quality and so criteria pollutant and greenhouse gas modeling for the state. So the intent is to look at if you implement this type of electrification, does it actually have a positive or negative effect on GHGs and air quality?
Because the Callan virus screen identifies
Right.
lots of disadvantaged communities that we recognize for cap and trade. So are you going to be using that, or is that just one tool?
I believe it's one tool, but we can clarify with them on what their criterion is for identifying the communities.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval.
Worthwhile work, a small investment on the part of SCAQMD to be a part of this. Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the item.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mayor McCallum,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson.
Yes.
Supervisor Benoit.
Yes.
Motion passes 4 ayes.
Okay, thank you very much. That'll take us to item number 4, contracts conducting studies with low-cost sensors. Pilladoria, Ms. Pilladoria, are you available, ready? Or Mr.? I'm sorry.
Mr. Yes. So yeah, good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Today, this agenda item is about executing contracts for conducting 2 different studies using both low-cost sensors and optical remote sensing technologies. So as you remember, recently we got two different EPA grants. One a STAR grant for basically educating the public about the correct use of low-cost sensor technology and the correct data interpretation from these low-cost sensors. And the second grant is also from EPA, and is a community scale grant. And it's about using optical remote sensing technology and low-cost sensors for monitoring VOC emissions from refineries, and also for basically trying to understand if there is a potential impact on surrounding communities. So a few highlights about the STAR grants. There are 4 different aims, but basically the main objective is to develop a toolkit for educating the public on the correct use of low-cost sensors. We are also going to use the resources that we have within our own SCAQMD program to evaluate the performance of commercially available sensors and select sensors that are available and viable for measuring different air toxic in communities. We will deploy the sensors in 6 different communities throughout California. We will involve at the very least 150 to 200 community members and deploy, we think, about 150 sensors. The sensor selection will be based on the specific needs of their communities. So it could be PM sensors or ozone sensors or even VOC sensors if the community thinks that that's what needs to be measured. And last but not least, after all of these toolkits will be developed and sensor data will be collected, we will share all of our experience and results on our SCAQMD website, and we also make sure that we communicate the lessons learned with various communities throughout California. The second EPA grant is basically, we are going to use 2 different kinds of advanced monitoring technologies. One is a combination of what is called the PID sensor, but basically it measures VOC, and this particular sensor has been developed by staff, and it has a VOC sensor on the bottom. You can see it is on the right-hand side of the slide. It has a VOC sensor on the bottom and an anemometer for measuring wind direction and wind speed on the top. So this particular kind of device will be deployed at the fence line of 1 or more refineries to basically capture sudden variations in VOC concentration that might be coming from different refinery activities. And at the same time, we will also work with a company that is using advanced optical remote sensing technologies, and they will conduct also fence line monitoring at the same refineries and also within the communities to assess whether or not some of these VOC and air toxic emission may cause some sort of exposure risk to the communities. So this is basically not a very Hollywood grade animation, but it's just to show you in essence what the project is all about. So it's basically concurrent deployment of low-cost sensors around the fence line of the facilities and in the communities, and at the same time simultaneous measurements using more advanced technology. So the recommended actions are listed here. So we would like to execute, we would recommend to execute the following contracts from the Science and Technology Advancement fiscal year budget 2016 and 17. The money has already been recognized and appropriated by the board. And below there is a list of the contracts that we would like to execute with FluxSense, STI, Sonoma Technology Incorporated, a research group at UCLA, and 2 community groups, CCAEJ and CBE. And with this I conclude, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions, colleagues?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a comment. Earlier this week, I was in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and it was at the National Association of Clean Air Agencies. And during the number of presentations that were there, Dr. Polidori was able to present our agency's efforts with regards to these programs. And across the entire membership, there was nothing but praise and recognition for the work that Dr. Polidori and the staff is doing here. And people came up to me throughout the entire conference expressing their appreciation for all the leadership that we're showing on this. So I just wanted to make sure that we recognize the staff and Dr. Polidori for all the great work that's going on, because it's not just helping here, but it is helping again across the entire United States.
Well, thank you to Dr. Polidori and all the folks involved. We would just recall for the purpose of the group that I believe it was in Indian Wells at a annual conference. We had a lengthy discussion about these types of remote devices and taking a leadership role in the country. It looked like a place we could fit in well and do good work that would be a benefit to all air quality districts. And it looks like it's working extremely well and along the ideas that we brought forward at that time. Other comments or questions, colleagues?
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Please.
We mentioned earlier the community that is around the Torrance refinery, and this community is very concerned about having sensor ability, monitoring ability, because the threat to their safety is pretty immense with the use of HF at their refinery. So I think this kind of work is really useful and helpful as we look at ways to assure that community of their safety and make sure they're educated and can monitor in their own backyards. So thank you for this work.
I concur completely. Any other comments? The one other thing that I would remind Mr. Nastri is that I think I mentioned at the last meeting, I think it would be a good idea to give the full board an update on our AQ-SPEC program.
So Supervisor, that's the next item for the committee to consider if we forward it to the board. So the next item is actually an overview of the entire program. This was just for a portion of it and to ask for funding for continued support, in particular for 2 specific programs.
Right, okay. So that's item 4, and I'll entertain a motion on that specific part of this process, or that item.
I'll move the item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on item number 4. Please call the roll.
Mayor McCallum,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Councilmember Robinson,
Yes.
Supervisor Benoit,
Aye.
motion passes 4 ayes.
Okay, so then we'll go ahead and move into that further discussion of the AQ-SPEC program.
Okay, so this presentation is about a status update on the activities that the AQ-SPEC group has been conducting in the past couple of years. So the AQ-SPEC program was created by the governing board just exactly 2 years ago. We invested about $500,000 for purchasing instrumentation equipment, the laboratory chamber. And of course, the main goals and objectives are the field that, we wanted to create a center that is able to conduct a comprehensive field and laboratory evaluation of the performance of these numerous low-cost sensors that are available nowadays in the market. So we basically bought, leased, loaned, borrowed every kind of low-cost sensors device we could find in the American market, in the European market, and now we are also moving in the Chinese market. So most of these sensors measure either gases or particle pollutants, and they have very, very low time resolution, so they measure like 1 minute or 5 minutes data. So the field testing started on September of 2014 at one of our monitoring stations in Rubidoux. That's our main monitoring site for conducting this field testing. We also have a backup station right next to the 710 freeway. And so far we have evaluated about 30 sensors. And so I'll show you some of the tested results in the following slides. And in terms of laboratory testing, we have developed this state-of-the-art laboratory chamber that is able to test both particle and gaseous pollutants. The peculiarity about this chamber is that it's able to create different type of environments. So we are able to test the sensors at temperatures that vary between 0 degrees and 50 degrees C, so near freezing and very hot, and at humidity varying between 5 and 95%. So we are able to recreate the conditions that you would find, for example, in Alaska or in Florida and in many, many parts of the United States. So also staff has developed a website, and the site address is on the top of the slide there, where you can find, and the public can find, all kind of information about our program, what we do, the type of activities conducted within our program. We have a page about air sensor news. It's pretty comprehensive, and I invite you to take a look. So one of the pages of our website includes a sensor list of every device that we have tested within the program. As an example there, if you click on one of the devices, there is another page that shows you about what that particular sensor can do, what it cannot do, technical specification, different kind of applications. And in most cases, you will find also a video that teaches you the basic about how to use the sensor and how to collect the data using that particular sensor. So you will also find a summary of our field testing results. And here is an example. We've included useful information such as the make and model, the principle of operation of every sensor, the approximate cost of the sensors, the time resolution. And in the last column, there is what is called a correlation coefficient. It's basically a number from 0 to 1. Sensors with the 0 means that there's absolutely no correlation between the data from that sensor and the data from our reference EPA-approved instrumentation. And of course, an R-square of 1 means that there is perfect correlation. So far, after 2 years, we have found the following results. When it comes to PM sensors, so sensors for monitoring particulate matter, they actually perform fairly well. Most of them have a minimal downtime, so over a 2-month period, they were able to collect about 95% of the data, which is quite impressive for something that costs a few $100s. They have a moderate variability, meaning that if you buy different units of the same model, the precision between that, those units is pretty good. And in terms of correlations, most of them had a correlation between 0.7 and 0.9, which again, for a low-cost PM sensor is not that bad at all, especially compared to our devices that we use in our station that cost $20,000 or more. So however, most of these PM sensors are not calibrated. So if you're thinking about deploying them in the field, you need to calibrate them first in order to get good results. And also there is some bias due to the algorithm that different vendors use to convert, basically the signal from the sensors into particle mass concentration. So the picture when it comes to gaseous sensors is slightly different. They have acceptable data recovery, but not as good as the one from PM sensors. That they have a wider intramodal variability, so you really need to pay attention to the fact that 10 different sensors for monitoring, let's say, nitrogen oxide, they might have different responses, and so you need to check for that kind of variability. So when it comes to pollutants like CO and NO, in the market you can find a low-cost solution for monitoring those pollutants. When it comes to ozone, it's a little trickier. There are a couple of solutions, a couple of devices that can monitor ozone very well. They are not exactly low cost. One of them is also EPA certified and cost about $4,000. But for the most part, ozone is very susceptible to interference with NO2. So measuring ozone using this type of devices is still a little uncertain. When it comes to other pollutants such as SO2, H2S, and especially VOCs, it's very difficult to measure these three pollutants using available sensor technologies. So, of course, we couldn't resist the temptation of deploying these low-cost sensors in the field, and we tried to experiment with different devices of this sort. So we conducted a couple of pilot studies. The first was basically conducted at the fence line of the Rainbow Waste and Disposal Facility in Huntington Beach. What we basically did, we created a small PM sensor network. Like on the bottom part of the slide, there is basically the sensor box that staff developed and then deployed. It's basically a combination of low-cost sensors, a solar panel, a battery, and a GPS device, and also a wireless communication to send all of these PM sensor data to a server so that we can monitor PM1, PM2.5, and PM10 in real time. We also worked with a small company called Meshify. They specialize in networking of this type of devices. And they basically helped us to build a couple of websites that we then you can use to monitor all of these PM concentration in real time, but also to do some data analysis on all of this information. One of the most interesting features is that the website can send email or text notifications to the user every time that the PM concentration around the fence line is above a certain threshold that is specified by the user. Just to give you some idea of how, I don't know if you can play this slide, it's an animation, but if somebody can click on anywhere on the slide. This is called a heat map, and basically it's a graphical representation in this case of 3 days worth of data. Of course, when you have 1 minute data from 10 devices 24/7, you end up having hundreds of thousands of data points. So one of the best way of dealing with this massive amount of information is to represent it on a graph like this one. So whenever the dot is red, it means that you have high PM concentration, and whenever that dot is green or yellow, you have either low or moderate PM concentration. So this is a very immediate way to basically take a look at all of the data at once. Pilot study number 2, we just finished the deployment of 25 low-cost PM sensors in the San Bernardino and Redlands area. This sensor can monitor PM2.5 and PM10, and they are wirelessly connected to a server. And the main objective of this pilot study is basically, in that area right now, we only have 3 fixed monitoring stations. So, at this point, we have 3 monitoring stations, information about PM from the 3 monitoring stations that are complemented from PM information from 25 different devices. So we can get a much better representation of the spatial variability of PM in that area. So another objective of the study is that we wanted to test the sensor variability. We wanted to see if the sensors perform well after a month, 2 months, 6 months, and 1 year. And then, of course, we want to see if this concept is scalable. So if the sensor network of 25 devices works well, then maybe we can scale it up to 50, 100, or 200 devices, or maybe more.
How were the locations chosen?
Some of them are around the stationary monitors, so that we want to see if they compare very well. And some other are farther away, and some other were chosen based on convenience, because, of course, we needed to find 25 people willing to host sensors on their backyard, and that takes time as well. So it's a combination of, try to be practical, and at the same time, try to find location that makes sense. Some of the other activities, we received a small grant from EPA, about $100,000, for basically evaluating their sensor boxes. They developed these sensor devices that measure ozone and PM2.5 using sensor technology. So what we are going to do, we are going to deploy them in the field, and then we are going to do some lab testing to see how they perform. And then they asked us to basically deploy them at 10 different locations in the South Coast Air Basin and leave them there for 8 months to see, again, similar to our study, how they perform, to get some temporal variability about ozone and PM, and to assess their overall performance. This is a study that I talked about in my previous presentation. It's another EPA grant. It's a community scale study to use both low-cost air quality sensor for measuring VOCs and higher cost optical remote sensing technologies to assess fence line emissions of VOCs, but also potential impacts of both VOCs and air toxics in surrounding communities. Again, it should be noted that the low-cost sensors device was developed entirely by staff here at SCAQMD. I also talked about the EPA STAR grant, and go to the next. So, as I said at the beginning, we invested about $500,000 in the program back 2 years ago, and we received so far about 1.5 million, actually a little more than that, in external funds, mostly from EPA, but also from other activities. We applied for a NASA grant about 3 months ago. We are waiting to hear the results, but our cut of the proposal would be about $800,000. And also there is this initiative. Basically, it's an e-enterprise advanced monitoring is a joint initiative between EPA, state, and tribe agencies to basically find and support innovations in measurement technologies and to kind of understand how to deal with the data from these technologies. There are 5 different teams handling 5 different activities regarding air monitoring technologies. In particular, there is Team 1 that is trying to find a way to assess the viability of creating a third-party certification programs for air quality sensors. And there's also Team 3 that is trying to understand how to interpret sensor data and also data coming from more advanced technologies. And Lucky Tisopoulos is part of the steering committee. I am the state lead for Team 1, and Dr. Jason Lowe is a part of Team 3. So we are heavily involved in these kind of activities. And last but not least, I would like to thank the other members of the AQSPEC group. And with this, I conclude. Thank you.
Okay, comments, colleagues?
One comment. Mr. Chair,
Ms. Mitchell, go ahead.
there was one
Go
slide,
ahead.
there was one slide where you showed that you could actually know what level of PM they were at. Because some people know that they can't go outside when it's above 25, or they know they're going to have asthma, they know they're going to have impact. So I can imagine that that kind of data would be very useful for people who are particularly susceptible.
My only comment is just very impressive. I mean, what you and your team are doing right now is just exactly where we need to be focused. It's exciting to see technology getting to a point where I think, I don't know if I saw it in this presentation or a previous one, but citizen scientists can, start collecting this data themselves. And, so it's very exciting to see. One question I had was on that citizen side to it. You mentioned how calibration is really important. How does that happen when somebody's kind of finds something over the internet, at a, some retail location? How do, is there any mechanism for trying to make sure that those are properly calibrated? Is the industry doing that?
Lately, if you buy one of these PM sensors for, I would say, like some of the most reputable manufacturers, they're trying to equip themselves with the same kind of chamber that we have, so that they can do some calibration up front, and they cannot really guarantee, the calibration all over the United States. For example, if you calibrate the sensor using like field information, that's only, that calibration, that sensor is only good in that particular part of the country, and that's a problem. Yeah. If you have a chamber, maybe it's a little better, because then you can vary the condition, build your calibration curve, and guarantee, the performance of the device over a wider range of environments. But, that's a very big problem, especially for local sensors that you can find on eBay or put together by very small companies that kind of know what they're doing, but they don't have, the knowledge necessary to really, guarantee that their sensor is going to work well everywhere, every time.
I can see that being a challenge down the road where someone comes to us and says,
Yes.
something's really bad here, and, you know, our own analysis isn't showing that, and it's calibration differences.
Exactly.
And Councilman, as Grant had mentioned, as part of the enterprise communication groups, that's one of the tasks and issues that we've been presenting as part of the data communications group, because we would like to, as a long-term vision, integrate the sensor and citizen data to the network data that is calibrated on a regular basis. So that way, if they can patch into, let's say, a common network with their sensor data along with the air monitoring data, they can compare for themselves, maybe not with their own calibration chamber, but at least they can do just kind of a gut check. Say, I'm going to bring my sensor to this localized air monitoring station, we see the data there, and we can kind of compare it just as a comparative basis on that scale.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
And if I could just add, one of the major concerns about having so much technology out in the field is what do the results really mean? You know, if we see a spike, what does that really mean? And so one of the elements of the grant is actually focusing on data interpretation and communication. And that's an area that, you know, we see moving forward that has potential to both inform, but also for people to perhaps not use appropriately. And so developing that educational component, developing a true understanding is something that I know is very important to it. It's something that I know we talked about with Chet at EPA and others, and it's an area where we're going to really focus a lot of resources as well. So.
I can definitely imagine that, and you know, your I forget what the animation on your one slide was, you know, very intriguing just to watch, you know, and I know it's just a little sample set of data there, but you know, just looking at that bottom right-hand corner at the Rainbow facility that seemed to be always red, but the rest of it just kind of bouncing around, it kind of shows in a very specific square footage, you know, situation where a focus probably needs to be. I don't know what that is.
And that's a great observation, because that part of the facility is where the construction equipment is dumped by the public.
Okay.
There's a lot of loading, crushing, moving, and the emissions there are very high.
Yeah.
So we think that could be used for a housekeeping tool for that, right?
Sure.
Not just monitoring enforcement, but that's for the facility as well.
Couple more questions when everybody else is done. Looking back at the chart on, and I guess it's page 8 on the AQ spec PowerPoint. It's results field testing is the title on the top of the page. And I just lost my video here. I'm not sure what's going on. I guess we're still going everywhere else, and I just lost this one in front of me. Oh, there we go. One of the concerns I raised when we first got into this field was that, you know, that we should be developing a system that would guide a potential citizen purchaser of these devices as well as doing the work. And I specifically recall having a discussion at the meeting about that the results need to be synthesized down into something that a citizen could understand. And for instance, if I look at this chart on the air quality egg version 2, it's about the 4th or 5th one down, and try to discern how good is this device. I look over, I guess, is the right-hand column, and I see 03 colon R2 squared plus or minus 0.0 to 0.20. Folks, I'm sure all the scientists in the room know exactly what all that means, but the average citizen just hasn't a clue. And what we talked about was you know, something more akin to what you see when you go to Consumer Reports, and in the area of accuracy you get an A, B, C, or D, and the cost you get A, B, C, or D, or some form of evaluating these things that would be in a format that could be utilized by a citizen who's deciding which of these devices is the best to purchase and which is the best value in the dollar. Is that practically impossible, or could we do something that would get us there?
So Executive Director Nastri is suggesting 1 thumbs up or 2 thumbs up, but we were also thinking of the 1 smiley face versus 2 smiley faces, or. But the truth is, we can move to a system like that, Supervisor. But I think the caution that staff has is we also want to make sure the public is aware that there's more than just purchasing something off the shelf and deploying it, because as all the concerns that were mentioned here is there's calibration issues, there's the utility in terms of what they want to measure, but also the interpretation of the data, which is of a concern, because as Councilmember Mitchell noticed, that heat map showed some red bursts of high concentration, but if that's only instantaneous, that may not be as big a health concern as if it was over an hour period, for example. So we will certainly propose something that could be more consumer friendly, but we also want to caution that there is still more to it than just picking out the green ones, for example, for the best sensors. And that's exactly what the EPA STAR grant is intended to do.
It's not a simple request, and it's got a lot of factors involved, and I go back to look at Consumer Reports or other ratings, and they've spent years trying to figure out how to synthesize this data into English and make it usable. And it would take us some effort to do that, but I think it would be valuable. The other question I had is, are these devices being provided to us by the manufacturer? Are they buying them? Are we buying them? How's this? We had some discussion about how that would work. I don't know what we ended up doing.
So our criteria for low cost is about $2,000. Usually if the sensor is $2,000 or less, we tend to buy it. If it is more expensive than that, then we work with the manufacturer. So we either borrow it for a few months, or hopefully we get the big discount, or they give it to us for free, which happens quite often actually.
But there is some question about sustaining this type of testing of the sensors. And I know in discussions with EPA and ourselves, we're looking at the possibility of perhaps the vendors providing or paying and looking at some type of certification. So maybe this program becomes self-funding. Maybe there's a third-party aspect to it. Those are some things that the staff is looking at, Mr. Chairman.
Those are critically important steps to move this from a great start to something really, really valuable, where the whole air quality world would look to the rating and see if this device has got approval from South Coast. Does it have that stamp of approval, and then what were the ratings in cost, accuracy, et cetera. Now you guys where we want to go. Comments, other comments? Okay. I don't know if I overstepped there. My colleagues are not hearing much, but I hope that we can get into that area, because I think that's where we really end up having some great additional value. Anybody else comments on that? That is information only. Are you going to bring that then to the full board?
Yes, we will plan to do so. I think we'll be able to do it on the.
Okay. Very good. All right. So let me see. My iPad just went dead here. Hold on a second. I can get back to where we are. This is a big piece. Now, do we have another item to go to? See, agenda item number 6. I'm sorry, I'm having a technical difficulty
Number
here.
6, Supervisor, it's the
Which
last
item are we coming up on?
It's the Clean Fuels Draft Plan Update.
Okay, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Supervisor.
I'm with you now.
This is Naveen Berry, and I'm going to give an overview of our draft plan for next year on the Clean Fuels Program. Just as a way of background, staff comes to this committee twice a year, typically in the fall with a draft plan update, and then in the late winter, early springtime to provide an update on the final plan, as well as present the annual report for the prior year. The plan is essentially just a guideline for staff to pursue projects over the next year period, and we get extensive feedback on our draft from our Clean Fuels Advisory Group, our Technology Advancement Advisory Group, certain technical experts. We also work with our government partners at the Energy Commission, Air Resources Board, EPA, DOE, just to name a few, as well as many, many other universities and other academics. We also get feedback from groups like the Innovators Roundtable that I presented to the board a couple of months ago, and then we meet with individual industry groups as well to get feedback. Staff also takes into consideration federal or state programs that are ongoing or are under consideration, and I'm just going to throw out a couple of examples. One was a recently passed Phase 2 rule by EPA, and it's that basically provided some national guidelines on GHG reductions, but also talked about what changes can be made to the engine technologies or heat recovery or other types of efficiencies. And that also had a discussion about the proposed national or our petition for a national standard, and we're hoping that those steps are taken in that direction in the near future. Another example of a state program that we would leverage off of is the Sustainable Freight Action Plan that calls for increasing system efficiency as well as maximizing the use of zero or near zero trucks. This slide basically just summarizes, again, you've heard the air quality management plan discussions for over the last 18 months or so, just emphasizing that to get to our 75 ppb ozone national air quality ambient levels by 2032, we need to continue to focus on reducing NOx emissions primarily from trucks, and those are somewhere in the 43% range for 2023. And then 55% by 2031 to be able to accomplish that. And as I indicated, the lowest hanging fruit in all this is actually for us. So our plan continues to focus on those areas. Again, the plan looks at advanced hybrid technologies, both plug-in hybrids and all-electric range. It continues to focus on alternative fuels for medium and heavy-duty engines, continues to focus on developing and demonstrating clean container transport technologies, and I'll get into some of those in a little bit more detail. So staff is shifting its focus from last year to this year, really kind of emphasizing the need for larger scale hydrogen refueling stations that may be necessary to support some of our on-road truck projects that have been approved by the governing board, specifically fuel cell trucks. We've gone through and obtained approval from the committee as well as the board on really taking into account where fuel cells serve as a range extender for electric platforms. So as you heard earlier today, electric trucks have shown to be fairly effective in doing dray service in the near or short haul areas, but we really want to have that potential grown to our inland empire. So in order to accomplish that, our focus is really going to be to provide not just additional truck platforms that may be using fuel cells as range extenders, but also the infrastructure. And as you can appreciate, for trucks, those tend to use 25 to 30 kilograms of hydrogen on board, so they have to be fairly large systems, and we're going to continue working with our government partners as well as our private partners on that particular area.
Well, we need more hydrogen fueling stations in San Bernardino and Riverside County. We got one in Ontario, and we got one in Riverside. So if you're going to bring trucks out that way, you need to get some more infrastructure out there.
And that's precisely the thinking, Mayor. And the Inland Empire being the hub of warehousing, I think it's imperative that we have a large-scale station there. In addition to, of course, our continued focus with CEC and ARB on light-duty stations as well. So we're certainly cognizant of that need. We're going to, again, the plan focuses on deploying electric vehicle charging infrastructure as well, but with a special focus on medium and heavy duty vehicles. Light duty EVSE programs have been implemented by many utilities, many municipalities. Our governing board also approved the deployment of a rebate program for home charging, so our focus is going to continue to emphasize medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure. We're also going to continue working on, or I should say, leveraging our success to this point with heavy-duty natural gas engines and refocus some of our efforts on liquid fuel, heavy duty engines that can help us with long haul type of uses. So you're certainly going to see an emphasis by staff on developing and leveraging off the early success that ARB's had and working with MICA and other entities on developing liquid fueled heavy duty engines. And then we'll continue to focus on biogas production local, as well as continue our efforts on demonstrating low or near zero natural gas engines on various platforms, in addition to the refuse trucks and transit buses that have already been started. This slide basically, I presented very briefly earlier this year as well, and it goes to a desire to focus on technology readiness and how do we rank or use a ranking approach. And typically, the little summary slide, and I don't mean to go in all the details, but it's an approach that's used by DOE for quite some time on a technology readiness level. And it has a numbering scheme with different levels of maturity. And I just wanted to indicate that most of the projects that we work on in the Clean Fuels Group is somewhere between TRL 4 and 8, that they're beyond the lab scale, but they're not certainly ready for commercial scale just yet. And this looks into a variety of different aspects: infrastructure constructability, technology readiness, near-term implementation, duty cycle fulfillment, as well as operational compatibility. And then, of course, there's a cost aspect as well. But as the supervisor indicated in the earlier item, there's been a desire of our governing board, as well as some of our advisory groups, to develop a simple consumer products like a rating system. So staff has attempted to do something along those lines, taking the listed criteria and coming up with such an approach. We did share this, and it's very small font, but certainly we can provide a lot more detail on this to the committee, but this is just kind of an initial overview. This approach did get some positive feedback from our Clean Fuel Advisory Group. We met with them about a month and a half ago, and they liked the approach and the simplicity. And basically the red is that it is going to have some pretty significant benefits in terms of emission reductions and greenhouse gas reductions. But yet, the technology is not that mature yet. It is not ready for full commercialization. And I'll give you an example. For fuel cell or battery electric Class 8 trucks, those can provide some significant emission and health benefits. But that technology is not ready to be deployed in very large scales. We're working towards that effort in terms of our greenhouse gas reduction fund project from last year. But the idea is that taking into account where the technology may not be ready for fully implementation or for full implementation, we want to use the Clean Fuels Fund for those types of projects to get them closer to commercial readiness. Again, I want to emphasize that this ranking system is really just a snapshot from staff, taking into consideration our understanding and experience with the different technologies, the potential benefits that can be had, where their maturity is at this point, and then, of course, taking into account the cost of the technology and the incentives that are trying to grow. So just a quick overview of what that could look like.
Okay, so how do we come up with these actual ratings here? I mean, what's the determinant factors and whether something's doing well or poorly or satisfactory? I mean, what's the data behind it?
So what we've done is we've looked at a variety of different projects that we've successfully worked on that we think have a pathway towards commercialization. So I'll take, for example, the Class 8 electric or plug-in electric truck with all electric range project that we brought to the board, I believe earlier this year. We're going to deploy 43 such trucks, leveraging funds from the ARB. We're going to collect data on them. And what we've seen in the earlier stage from funding from DOE that we had obtained a couple of years ago, we've seen that for certain Class 8 electric trucks, gray services, especially near near port grade service as possible with those. We're getting a lot of positive feedback on the performance. There's been some hiccups because they are demonstration projects, but we're taking that knowledge with us. And then as we scale up in terms of the number of trucks and the number of platforms, we're incorporating that into this kind of ranking structure.
I would answer it differently and say we don't have the specific rankings for this.
Yep.
So it's kind of like, is it better than diesel? 90% better, yes, that's good.
That's,
Is it
yeah,
50% better on cost? Then that's maybe, it's okay.
okay.
So, but we haven't gone through, this was presented as kind of as a trial draft to our advisory committee, and we got positive feedback, so I think our next step is to go in and identify what those percentages are in terms of the existing technology compared to the technology we're proposing.
I mean, in general, it sounds like what I'm hearing, so the environment and health part is good.
Yes.
Right, and then challenges with technology and whether we're there yet, and then cost is the biggest challenge. It's really expensive because there's not the scalability yet. So it just intuitively it all makes sense. I was just kind of wondering what was and that helped explain it. So
thanks, Matt. So this slide just basically shows a proposed distribution. So for example, about a third of the funding would go towards hydrogen and fuel cell truck or bus projects, as well as the infrastructure associated with it. And about 23% would go towards similar but electric and hybrid technologies. And I just do want to emphasize again that there's a lot of overlap between those two. We really think there's synergies between electric and hybrid electric platforms and fuel cell and hydrogen platforms. This slide basically just summarizes but compares the 2016 plan to the 2017 plan. And as you can see, there's been a proposed jump in hydrogen and fuel cell areas, and then a drop in electric and hybrids because we started a fairly large scale project on electric and hybrids based on the GGRF funds we received. So the other areas have some fine tuning, but for the most part, they're generally about the same levels as last year. This slide basically shows the same exact comparison just on a side-by-side basis. And then currently this is just to provide an overview of our proposal to the committee and then receive feedback.
I'm sorry, did I miss, are you finished?
Yes, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that, so the audio is not real great. A couple of questions. Colleagues, your questions first.
I
don't see any. Let me just weigh in a couple of thoughts on the slide number 12, and the kind of displays it best, I think. We are in DC earlier this year talking about zero or near zero diesel engines at great length and 0.02 diesel engines. I'm just thinking that these other issues are important, but right now that is the most critical argument we're trying to make, is how we get that to those near zero diesel engines. I'd ask Mr. Nastri and the others there to tell me, do we think there's a need to do more in that area, given how critical that is right now in timelines?
Yeah, unfortunately, Executive Director had to step out, but he would agree with you. This is Matt. We think there's a couple opportunities. Well, let me say two things. One, the first thing, this is simply a draft, and it's staff's kind of blueprint for how we would prioritize going after projects, and that changes during the year depending on opportunities. So the second comment I would make is we think there are two opportunities that have come up to do more near zero liquid fuel compression ignition engine projects. One is ARB has a project at Southwest Research, the one that you're referring to, where they're getting very close to .02. And so we are in active discussions with them, Southwest Research and San Joaquin Air District, as well as the Energy Commission, to see who will help us co-fund that activity. We think there's a lot of opportunity there to get a .02 diesel engine. And the second is we've been working with several engine manufacturers, large engine manufacturers, one that starts with a V, to do a .05 or lower gram NOx DME or liquid fueled engine. So there's opportunities there as well. So those are the ones that we'll be pursuing, and we would bring them to this committee before bringing to the board as they come into fruition. But we would be happy
Okay.
to adjust this upward if you think that's appropriate.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'd be happy to address that bar upward if you think it's appropriate.
I'm thinking electrical and hybrids are great technologies, but there's not a lot of need for us to be further. I mean, the industry is driving that pretty heavily already, and the technology is pretty well understood. I don't know that we could make the same claim on the near zero diesel, and it is and we've identified it as a key factor in trying to make our long-term air quality goals in the district, and we're not going to move large numbers of that fleet to electric vehicles in the next decade. That's just, they're too expensive, it's still too far out, but we can, I think, develop a near zero diesel engine and do it relatively quickly, and maybe, I think we even have some examples of that where they're already claiming to have produced those. Helping move that area, I think, is every bit as important for us today as helping electric and hybrids, maybe more so.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
I might suggest that we increase that, what we call it low NOx, a low NOx engine. Because we're working not only on diesel, but the CNG low NOx engine. So we're working on the certification of the 12-liter.
Right.
Which would be a long-haul vehicle as well. So maybe we could increase that funding for what we call low NOx. Would that work?
We can certainly do that.
Would that be acceptable, Chairman?
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's exactly the same point I'm trying to get to, is that emphasis has to be our focus at this point in our timeline, in my opinion. I appreciate your support. With that single comment, is this at this point a receive and file?
Oh, my question I have, sorry, this is Jill Wynot. Can you give us an indication of approximately the relative amounts you would like to see this adjusted? You know, are we talking about 1%, 10%? That would be helpful for staff.
Where's the CNG currently in all of this?
So what I'd recommend for the funding amount, we would probably move $3 to $5 million from one or more categories to the engine categories, because that's just how much it's going to cost, likely. The CNG 12-liter engine is already underway. We think it'll be certified in Q1 of the next year, 2017.
Okay. So there's no funding in any of these bars for that?
It's already occurred.
It's already occurred, so there's nothing.
But I think Ms. Mitchell's comment is good, because we're always looking for, I heard an engine manufacturer say he doesn't care if it's run on pickle juice if it can get to .02, right? So it could be it could be natural gas, it could be whatever, as long as there's no other cross-media issues. But certainly we'll continue to look for additional fuels and get us the power and torque and emission reductions we need.
Yep. And I would agree with that comment.
If you're looking for a recommendation, I would think that the electric hybrids and engine systems, if you could balance those two bars where the green bar is closer to equal between those two categories, but do some work on trying to build up our near zero diesel would be my recommendation.
Easily done.
Does that answer Jill's question? We have
Exactly.
enough
Thank you so much.
direction? Okay.
Okay, any other comments?
No, good work.
Okay. Need to try and get back. Go ahead, what were you going to say? So that was item number
Six.
6, and that's staff written report only. Do you have any other business, any other items come before us? Colleagues like to suggest some future agenda item? Seeing and hearing none, how about public comments now? Anybody would like to comment on any item that was not on the agenda?
There's none here, Chairman.
Okay, seeing and hearing none, thank you very much. With that then, we'll adjourn to our next meeting, and I thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Councilman, did you have a concern about school buses that we could help answer?
No, I'm just
Trying to get an idea of the inventory?
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, it's,